First and foremost, what exactly is the Legacies of British Slave Ownership project?
Well, this is a project that we began 10 years ago, and it was, the inspiration was that we wanted to find a way of demonstrating to people living in Britain how significant the history of slavery is to Britain. So 47,000 individuals in the Caribbean, Mauritius, and the Cape of Good Hope were, in fact, compensated for the enslaved people that they had owned. And about half the money of the £20 million, which was paid in compensation, about half that money came to British owners with British addresses. So we were able to show how individuals benefited hugely. Some got massive amounts of money from this scheme of compensation. We've been given an enormous amount of support by members of the public who have themselves done work, often on their ancestors, enslaved people, as well as slave owners, and they've helped us with information. So all the information we've collected is on the database which we've created, which is called the Legacies of British Slave Ownership. And we have had about 1.5 million hits on our database. I think that's roughly the right figure now. So what this is showing is that lots and lots of people are using this information that we've made public. And what we did was not just state and digitize the amounts of money that people got, but insofar as we could, we followed the money and we tried to find out what people had done with that money. So what had they spent it on? Did they buy books and paintings? Did they invest in urban development? Did they buy country houses? Did they do up country houses? Did they give money philanthropically? What did they do with it? So all that information is on our website.
How do they help us to understand Britain's past?
It shows that, you know, Britain's supposed history of being very, very proud of abolition and emancipation has to go alongside another history, which is of conquest, of capture, and of enslavement of people. So that money made a very significant contribution to the development of how we think about modern Britain.
The connection of the database and country houses and slavery. So what can you tell us about that, Catherine?
Well, I can tell you that slave owners, one of the ways they like to spend their ill-gotten gains from compensation was on grand homes that they either built or many of them refurbished homes. And of course, some of these properties have come into the hands of the National Trust.
Does the database contain all slave owners from across British history, Catherine? And could we find any slave owner from any point in time?
No. You can find the records started with the compensation records. So the initial names on the database are all the people, the 47,000 individuals who got compensation in 1835, 1836. But since then, we've done a whole lot of work on the 18th century as well. So we've added many, many more names. But there are, of course, hundreds of slave owners that we haven't been able to trace in any way. And we've only done biographical material on the ones who had addresses in Britain. All they tell us is a snapshot of slave owners at a particular moment.
All the people on the records, were they slave owners?
No, another good point. There were people who got money who weren't themselves, they didn't directly own enslaved people. So people who were trustees on legal, the legal practice of the trust, which was a way of looking after an estate. And very interestingly, people, especially women, who were annuitants. So they'd been left an annuity, and the annuity was paid for by enslaved people who were hired out, probably in the Caribbean. So we found a lot of women who were in that situation. So one of the really interesting things about these records is that 40% overall of the slave owners were women, which I'm sure you would never have expected.
Absolutely.
Most of them were small scale owners,
Right.
and there were many, many slave owners of color, as well as they weren't all white by any means.